What is Crime and Punishment about? Traditional answers point to the polyphonic construction of the novel, the psychological portrait of a murderer's mind, and the religious allegories that Dostoevsky is famous for. I would like to propose a new reading of the masterpiece based on its topography. Dostoevsky takes great care to inform his reader about the exact displacement of his hero Raskolnikov. To this day, tourists in St. Petersburg are shown the murderer's closet-like apartment and the victim's house a few blocks down the street. Why does Dostoevsky locate his murder mystery so exactly on the map of St. Petersburg? As I will show, the answer reveals the hidden meaning of crime and punishment, which addresses a very timely and touchy subject, regicide. Dostoevsky used the city map to create a symbolic plot that elevates the murder story to political relevance. In order to sort out the ideological meanings of places and direction, it is important to track down the hero's orientation in the city. Dostoevsky lets Raskolnikov choose a special itinerary for his crime. On his way to the pawnbroker, the murderer passes a small park, the Yusupov Gardens, where Raskolnikov's thought seemed to float freely. Passing the Yusupov Gardens, he began to consider the construction of tall fountains in all the squares and how they would freshen the air. Following this train of thought, he came to the conclusion that if the summer garden could be extended right across the Champ de Mars and joined to those of the Mikhailovsky Palace, it would add greatly to the beauty and amenities of the city. At this point of the novel, Dostoevsky violates all laws of fictional verisimilitude for the sake of his ideological project. Raskolnikov is about to kill a woman while at the same time musing about the city's recreational spaces. However, Raskolnikov's ecological considerations are far from being accidental. If we identify his garden project on the city map, we get an interesting picture. Raskolnikov's path to his victim forms a geometric pattern. If we extrapolate his way to the site of the crime, we arrive at the Mariinsky Theater. In the 1860s, when Dostoevsky wrote his novel, the place of this theater was ripe with symbolic significance. The old theater was destroyed by a fire in 1859 and a new building erected in its place in 1860. The architect was the Russified Italian Albert Cavos, who was one of the main designers of the western townscape of St. Petersburg. His style was an eclectic classicism that imitated Italian architecture. With the reconstruction of the Mariinsky Theater, the repertoire changed as well. The theater used to be a place where one could see folkloristic Russian comedies, though this program soon gave way for the Western genre of the opera. In short, the Mariinsky Theater stands both in its architecture and in its music for an exaggerated Western influence. Dostoevsky might have gone so far as to say that it symbolizes Western degeneracy. Raskolnikov's itinerary acquires a symbolical meaning if we first amplify both his path and the adjacent green spaces in the city. Second, we have to move these patterns upward somewhat before turning them counterclockwise ever so slightly. Now we recognize the symbolic meaning as the route starts at the Peter and Paul fortress, passes the summer garden and ends at the Winter Palace. Looking at the emergent picture, it becomes clear that Raskolnikov's murder depicts a symbolical regicide. The route originates at the prison for revolutionaries and leads to the residence of the Tsar. Even the extrapolation of the enlarged itinerary leads to a significant place, to the monument of Tsar Peter I, who westernized Russia at the beginning of the 18th century. In Dostoevsky's nationalist ideology, Peter I is as negative a character as Napoleon. Both imperators stand for the utterly undesirable Western context of power, oppression, and individual self-affirmation. The topographical specificity of Raskolnikov's route hints to the fact that the murder in Crime and Punishment too is a regicide on a smaller scale. This literary motive could of course not be represented under Tsarist conditions and had to be hidden from plain sight. The topic of regicide was hot in Russia when Dostoevsky wrote the novel. At the beginning of the 1860s, many revolutionary pamphlets appeared and called for terror and bloodshed. A case in point is the pamphlet Young Russia from 1862 by the terrorist Petr Zaichnevsky. Zaichnevsky openly calls for the assassination of the Tsar, which was as of yet unheard of in a Russian context. For Dostoevsky, regicide was utter blasphemy. In Crime and Punishment, he presents a mental experiment that shows the fatal consequences of a Russian mind gone astray. The use of cartography in the interpretation of Crime and Punishment is, however, not confined to the reconstruction of itineraries. We can identify entire regions in the city of St. Petersburg that serve as ideological spaces in Dostoevsky's novel. A cartographic visualization of these structures will produce a cognitive map that does not represent equidistances, but values and perceptions instead. In Crime and Punishment, some districts of St. Petersburg are endowed with a hidden meaning. They represent Western Europe, America, and Siberia. We can locate these regions on a city map that represents St. Petersburg from a bird's-eye perspective. From this point of view, Raskolnikov's visit to Krestovsky Island, taking place before the assassination, acquires a specific sense. His wandering must be read as a symbolic emigration to the United States. Raskolnikov is looking for happiness. His murder is the attempt to reach a kind of a Napoleonic happiness, which is, of course, radically wrong in Dostoevsky's eyes. On Krestovsky Island, there is still another proposition of happiness. Dostoevsky writes, "There was no stuffiness, no evil smells, no public houses, but these pleasant new sensations soon gave place to painful and irritating ones. Occasionally, he would stop before some picturesque dacha in its green setting, look through the fence and see in the distance gaily dressed ladies on balconies or terraces and children running about the gardens. He took a particular interest in the flowers and looked at them longest of all. Splendid carriages and ladies and gentlemen on horseback passed him, and he gazed after them with curious eyes and forgot them before they were out of sight." The ironic tone of this description makes clear this is not Raskolnikov's happiness. It's too cheap, too material, too much of a Philistine's happiness. Raskolnikov sets out for the Napoleonic type of happiness. But the geo-ideological structure of St. Petersburg shows that the way to this wrongful happiness leads to the West. The Napoleonic happiness concentrates on individual ratiocination. The symbolic itineraries to America and Western Europe are dead ends. There is no solution at the end of the road. Only the very last itinerary, the one pointing towards the east, represents a solution. Raskolnikov confesses his guilt, kisses the earth, and is exiled to perform heavy labor in Siberia. This motive confirms Dostoevsky's stern confidence that the truth for contemporary Russia will come from the East. There is one last open question. The topographical allusions in Crime and Punishment are difficult to detect. Did Dostoevsky really think that his readers would be able to discover the hidden topic of regicide in his novel? My answer would be the following. Dostoevsky may have set up this riddle as a kind of test for his Russian readers. There may be a chance for the Russian people to recognize Christ as he is bound to reappear in this world if only his audience is able to decipher the secret message of Dostoevsky's novel. Both tasks are no easy feat. But Dostoevsky firmly believed that it was his task as a writer to open the eyes of his Russian readers and to prepare them for the arrival of Christ in Russia.